Hello and welcome. It's Friday afternoon. It's part of the summit of Lockdown Life to Loving Life. My name is Marianne Killick and I am the Ladies Life Lounge resident expert on hormone balance. So thank you very much for having me here this afternoon. Hopefully, a lot of you ladies will listen to this at some point today, whether it's live or on playback, and find out all about what your periods are trying to tell you about your health. So let me just begin. So as I said, my name is Marianne Killick. So just a little bit of an introduction to me so you know who you're talking to. So I've been working with women for over a decade, helping them with issues such as fertility, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, perimenopause, and other such problems. I've been working as an acupuncturist and also as an integrative women's health coach, which means that we look at women's health from the whole aspect of their life. So things like relationships and boundaries, nutrition, physical health, mental health. So the whole package of women's health. So in the lounge, I answer lots of questions about hormones, menopause, period, fertility, all that kind of thing. I'm there to generally support all the ladies. I'm also an author of a book all about self-care for busy women. So what we're here today to talk about is what your period is trying to tell you all about your health, because basically, periods are different for every single woman. None of us experience them exactly the same, but you'll notice over time certain patterns that belong to you, that happen for you, or things that change with your cycle. And your body's always trying to talk to you and tell you what's going on. So what I'd like to sort of do a brief dive into today really is introducing you to the idea of how you can understand what your period is telling you. So the first thing, I'm going to take you through understanding, what is normal in a period, what is common but abnormal, and what an optimal period looks like, and then how, when it differs from that, it is trying to tell you things about your health. So obviously the first thing that your period tends to tell you is that you're not pregnant. And this is because estrogen and progesterone, which are the key hormones in your menstrual cycle, are at their lowest point. Your body's realized it's not pregnant, the hormones have dropped, the lining has started to shed. And at this point, we also produce something called prostaglandins. And those are chemicals in our body that cause the uterus to contract to help expel the lining. And the other wonderful thing they do is they can make things like the mucosal tissues in your nose and everything more irritated. So one of the reasons that you can feel a bit congested just prior to your period is because of these hormones and these prostaglandins that are helping, build up to help you shed the lining of the uterus. If you can hear snoring beside me, by the way, that's the dogs. Right. So when you have your period, yes, it's blood, as we know blood, but it's also made up of the cells that are produced in vaginal secretions. It's made up of the top two layers of the uterine lining. So there's still another layer underneath, still building up, and that layer doesn't shed with your period. It's the top two layers. So again, what is usual for women in a period varies quite wildly. You get some women who only bleed for about 2 days, some go all the way for a week, but on average, you're looking at around 5 days. And a cycle that lasts anywhere between 21 to 35 days is often considered normal, but really you want to be in that 25 to 32 bracket for optimal health. And some women have a little bit of spotting, so not a huge amount of blood, but a small amount that gives them that warning sign that the period's on its way. And that usually takes place ideally for no more than a day before your period. And then again, the amount of period blood that is lost each month can vary widely. So it goes from 13 mils to 217 mils. Now, if you think that a can of Coke is about 330 mils, the average amount of blood that a woman will lose in her monthly period is just under a quarter of a can of Coke. But obviously, if you're on the very heavy end of things, you're looking at 2/3 of a can of Coke, or you're right down to, literally just a layer in the bottom of the can, if you're down at the bottom end of 13 mils. And when people talk about, what cycle day are you on, what day of your cycle, day one of your cycle is the first day that you have your menstrual bleed. So on average, a little bit of mild to moderate cramping that happens, in the first couple of days or just before your period. And it really shouldn't, you shouldn't be having pain that disrupts your ability to function normally. Okay. You should be able to get through your sanitary wear every 2 to 3 hours without needing to change it. If it's a lot sooner than that, then you're talking about a period that's too heavy. You shouldn't have more than a few little small clots that aren't really bigger than 5 pence pieces. And what you're looking at is that most of your period bleeds should be kind of a fresh red colour, where either the start or the end of the period tends to be kind of either brown or darker. Okay, so this is the kind of common presentation of a period. So things that aren't normal, but actually things that happen an awful lot for women, but are seen as normal because we aren't taught differently, or there's a taboo around talking about this. So women suffer in silence, not realizing that actually these things need checking out. So if you're having periods that flood and leak through your clothes, that's not right. If you're having large, big, thick clots, big clumpy ones or long stringy ones, that kind of thing, then basically that's not right either. If your level of period pain either before, during or after it is disrupting your ability to function at work or to go to school, then that's not right. Pain that goes longer for more than 2-3 days, a period that lasts more than 7 days, bleeding at a time in your cycle that isn't your period, or going for longer than 35 days between cycles, or having a period more frequently than every 21 days. All of these are signs that there's some sort of imbalance or problem that needs checking out, and all of these warrant a trip to the doctor. Okay. So things that can cause women's periods to be super heavy. So perimenopause is a big one, because one of the things that happens as we head into perimenopause is actually the first hormone that starts to drop tends to be the progesterone. So relative to the estrogen we produce, we become dominant, or an excess of estrogens. Although the estrogen levels can be dropping as we head towards our menopause, relative to the other hormones, it's too high. And estrogen effectively causes us to build that lining even further. So when you're in dominance of estrogen, and that dominance of estrogen can also be caused by excess weight and a very sugary diet as well, then you tend to have a heavier bleed. Then if you develop fibroids, which are kind of benign growths in the uterus, again, that disrupts your hormones, but also creates a larger surface area and can create a heavy period. Endometriosis, again, can be linked with heavy periods and really, really painful periods. There's a condition called adenomyosis, where the wall of the uterus, which is a muscle, gets kind of uterine lining growth inside the wall of the muscle. And again, that can link to heavy bleeds and painful periods. Polycystic ovarian syndrome, can also, because it's a very much an estrogen dominant condition, and very much linked with hormone imbalance, again, can also lead to these heavy bleeds. And as you head into thyroid problems as well, that can go one of two ways. Either you can end up having no periods or irregular cycles, or it can give you heavy periods. And then obviously there is, as we get much older, and particularly if you have bleeding once you've already been through the menopause and haven't had a period for at least a year, if you then start to bleed again, that can be a sign of cancer. Okay. So, just because it's quite common for women to suffer with their period and have episodes of flooding, heavy bleeding, days off school with pain, and we see this as normal, it's not necessarily normal. Common doesn't mean normal. And, people always think I'm slightly mad when I say, your period really should be a non-event. If our body is completely imbalanced, we have no pain. Okay. At the most, we get a very dull sensation that something's about to happen, but nothing more than that. Your period blood just appears. You go to the toilet and say, oh, there it is. It's fresh red. You have a clear start, so it appears, and then it stops quite cleanly. None of these days of dribs and drabs at either end of your period. When you're having your period, if it's optimal, you're kind of not really thinking about it. It's not getting in the way of your life. You're not constantly aware, oh, I'm on my period. And your mood, when you're in complete balance, your mood isn't massively disrupted by your period, and you don't get bowel disruption, because that's another thing that is very common with periods. As your period comes, it can also then lead to loose bowels at the same time. So that's a perfect period. And, this is the face that most people pull when I say that. They say, really? Who are you talking about? Who are these women that have periods like this? And they do exist. And if that's not you, chances are you can become a person who has a period like this, because your period is constantly trying to talk to you. And I'll come on to this. So basically, how your period appears for you is really telling you how well rested you are, how well nourished you are, what kind of stress levels you've got going on, whether you've got unresolved emotional issues happening, whether your body is in a state of systemic inflammation, and how hormonally balanced we are. Because any disruption to any of these things I've just mentioned leads to an imbalance in our period. Okay, so you might have noticed this yourself. If you've had, the month from hell, it's all gone wrong at work, you've had a fight with your partner, kids giving you grief, or, you've had a major row with someone in your life, you'll notice that your next period can be really horrendous in terms of pain, or it's heavy, or it's late, it's delayed, and this is one of the things I advise women to do is start keeping, a little bit of a journal, a little notebook where you just jot down some of your symptoms and some of the things that are going on in your life, and then see what kind of period you have. And it's all related. If you've been, for example, on holiday and you've been sort of really super chilled out and relaxed and, going for long walks and getting into the sunshine, you find that your next period really isn't too much of a bother. So it is all linked. So in Chinese medicine, we set a lot of store by your period and how it presents in terms of what it's actually telling us about how you are systemically. Because what women tend to forget, and what the medical profession as well tends to forget, is that the uterus isn't just existing kind of, on its own. It's there as part of your body. So what's happening in all of your body will impact on your uterus, and it will impact on what's going on. So it's like we get this report card every month as to what's actually going on in our bodies. So when we start our period each month, how you start to bleed tells us what's going on. So if you kind of get this dribs and drabs, so you get several days of bits of spotting, before you actually get stuck into the main bleed, that tells us that really you're probably a bit run down, a bit tired, because your body literally hasn't got the energy to go, whoomp, get this period out. Okay. And, sometimes it can mean that you didn't fully clear out all of the lining at the end of the last period. And, it's an indicative that usually you're quite run down. So what you're wanting, if you're in balance, as I said before, is this start to your period, which is kind of clean and it just appears, a decent amount of blood, not this dribs and drabs business. If your period blood is really dark red, kind of black almost, or you come on, like when you come on your period, it's like whoosh, Niagara Falls, it's a flood straight in. What we talk about is a sign of heat in the body. Now that loosely correlates to signs of inflammation. So that usually means you're systemically inflamed in your body. And that can be through stress, it can be through like a sugary diet, it can be through alcohol, it can be through lack of sleep, all of those things. Then when you actually have your bleed, if you've got clots, if there's lots and lots and lots of tiny little clots, we talk about that as cold. And so if you were trying for a baby, for example, we'd be encouraging you to use hot water bottles throughout the month on that part of on your lower abdomen. We'd be encouraging you to eat food that's really nourishing. And then if when you bleed, you have like chunky, stringy clots that kind of hang out of you, all that kind of thing, again, this is a sign of what we call stagnation. And that means where things are stuck and not moving. So what causes your body to be stuck and not moving? Usually it's unresolved emotions, lack of movement. So, desk job, sat on your bum all day, emotions you've not dealt with, that, anger, frustration, and then the heat and inflammation again, which can be caused by unresolved emotions, stuff that's happened to you in life. Because let's face it, none of us get through life without stuff happening. Childhood trauma, messy breakups, tricky relationships, bullying from the boss, all sorts of different things can happen. And all of that, unless we're very good at working these emotions through, stay stuck in our body and have a physiological effect on us. If your period is really kind of gloopy and phlegm and kind of mucousy, we discuss that as being phlegm. And, it is kind of like the phlegm that you produce in your nasal passages, but it's also indicative, again, your body's not processing things thoroughly and well. Then if your period is super light or really pale, that tells us that you might be lacking in certain nutrients and deficient in certain hormones. You might be a bit low on the side of iron. You might be just not eating enough of nourishing foods. You might be having a lot of empty calories, or just working so hard, your body literally has nothing left over to create a nice rich lining with. As I said before, heavy flooding period, that's a sign of estrogen dominance and inflammation. And then lots of pain. You can have emotional pain, physical pain. So you might be someone who's suffering from a different health condition, which is causing you pain elsewhere in your body, where that physical pain also has a knock-on effect on how your period presents as well. So, when I work with women, I go into all these details with them. And, for people who aren't used to talking about periods, it's like, oh, but all this stuff is telling us so much about what's actually happening. So how you feel around your period is also really telling us quite a lot about what's going on with your general health. So if you feel completely exhausted around and kind of can't be bothered to move, and just you just want to spend the day in bed at the point that your period is starting again, that's telling you are not resting enough through the rest of the month. If you're kind of super grumpy, super irritable and irate, again, it's like the stress that you're under is disrupting your hormones to the point it's having that effect on your mood. It also tells us that you've probably got a lot of stress going on in your life, unresolved anger that you've not had a chance to get out, and also that you're also potentially not actually physically moving your body enough. If you get the munchies like that, I'm going to eat cake and I want every piece of bread and pasta in the house just before your period, again, that tells us your blood sugar is dipping and you're getting that craving for carbs. And what that's also telling us is that your management of your blood sugar balance generally isn't as optimal as it could be. Because the more imbalanced you are, the fewer cravings you actually get. And so that's telling us you need a few little tweaks to your diet throughout the month to become a little bit more blood sugar balanced. And then if after your period is finished, you are absolutely just whacked out, literally, all your energy has been poured out. Again, that tells us you haven't got an energy bank of good nutrients in your body, really, that's sustaining you through that loss of period blood. So again, we'd be looking at diet, lifestyle, and rest with that. So just want to also mention first menstrual cycles. A lot of us have daughters who, if they haven't already, will at some point be having periods. And a note is that it easily takes somewhere between 1 and 2 years for a young girl's menstrual cycle to become established. And it is also quite common at the point that we're establishing a menstrual cycle to have heavier periods when they first start. And this is because there's parts of your brain called the hypothalamus and the pituitary, which talk to your ovaries, and they have this kind of conversation, like an information highway, where these parts of your brain talk to your ovaries to establish this connection, this axis, where they tell your body when to ovulate, when to build the lining, when to shed the lining. And whilst that axis is trying to get established in a nice, steady, regular pattern, it can be a bit jerky. It's a bit like stop, start, stop, start. And so young girls can tend to be a little more estrogen dominant until they have more regular ovulations kicking in, which produces the progesterone. And therefore, their periods can start in the first instance by being a bit heavier. And so, try and resist the urge, unless they truly are really horrifically hard to manage. Going on the birth control pill at age 13, 14 isn't necessarily a really great plan, because it's also potentially masking any underlying problems, like if she's suffering from endometriosis or polycystic ovarian syndrome. It will mask those symptoms, and then they won't necessarily get picked up until many years later when they're trying for a baby and then discover that they've got problems. And also, when your body's trying to establish that axis, disrupting it so early by going on the birth control pill, again, for many women won't cause any problems whatsoever, but for some it will. And long-term use of birth control can also deplete certain nutrients as well. So starting that early for so many years, unless you really need it for contraception, is probably kind of best to avoid, and best to try and let the cycle settle down through diet and lifestyle, acupuncture, that kind of thing, and only use contraception for young teens who don't need it for actual contraception, as a last resort. Okay. So if you are someone who is suffering with period pain in the moment, there are some key things that you can do. And so one of them is movement. If you are sitting there and the last thing you feel like doing when you've got bad period pain is actually doing anything. But if the least you can do is try and get up and get moving, go for a walk, just, tell yourself 10 minutes, no more. And that act of moving and walking will help everything uncramp and let go a bit more and will ease things through. The use of heat, like hot water bottles or a wheat bag over your lower abdomen, can be really soothing and calming. The use of what they call castor oil packs. There's all sorts of instructions on the internet how to do those, can be helpful if you've got painful periods too. The use of acupressure points, so there's a great one just between your thumb and your first finger. So that fleshy part there, you can sit there and massage that quite firmly. If you've got period pain or migraine as well, it's helpful for that. And that can really help. So if you're stuck somewhere in a meeting and you've got pain, sit there massaging that. And orgasm can really help because it produces, oxytocin, which is, a natural pain reliever and helps you feel calm and relaxed. So that's really helpful, even if that's probably the last thing you feel like indulging in. So those are the main things I wanted to run through with you today. There's plenty more that I could discuss with you about, diet around your period. And I deliberately didn't put those slides in because I wasn't sure exactly how long this is going to take. But if in that week leading up to your period, if you max out on foods that are rich in magnesium and omega-3s, that kind of thing, those are natural anti-inflammatory and anti-cramping foods. So things like all the green leafy veg, pumpkin seeds, and chocolate. And when I say chocolate here, it's not your Cadbury's Dairy Milk and your Galaxy bar that you're after. It is your kind of 70% dark chocolate. A few squares of it will contain loads of iron and loads of magnesium that are really beneficial in this time leading up to your period. So, indulge, but indulge with the right stuff. Use your cycle to help you discern what's actually going on for you as well. Because if just before your period, you find certain themes recurring for you, like you always get particularly annoyed with a certain person, or you're always very down about a certain aspect of yourself just before your period. If you kind of journal that a little bit and note it down, you'll see there's a pattern occurring. And usually if an issue keeps reoccurring like that and coming up from us, again, it is a sign that, it's an issue that needs looking at and addressing in your life. So use your period to your advantage to kind of give you that insight as to what is actually going on. Now, in my course, Cycle Hacking for Period Empowerment, that I've run before, and hope to run again in the future, I go into a lot of detail about what happens as well physiologically in each part of your menstrual cycle, during your period, in the follicular phase, which is the phase between your period and ovulation, when your egg is developing or maturing, I should say, ready for release. And this also impacts our behavior. Our whole mood, our mental health is affected by our period quite strongly. And, there's quite a lot you can do through diet and exercise to regulate this and even things out. The fact that before your period and when you're having your period, your motivation to do anything is on the floor, you're not imagining it, is what I'm trying to say, because your progesterone levels, which have dipped right down at that point, are very much linked to dopamine, which is the brain chemical which makes you want to get up and do things. And serotonin, which is the kind of happy hormone, makes you feel happy and bright and cheerful. That's very much bound to estrogen. And as your hormones shift and drop, these brain chemicals also shift and fluctuate. And so hormonal fluctuations and keeping your cycle as steady as possible has a huge impact on our mental health as well. So it's very much a case of using your menstrual cycle to tell you what's going on for you generally, and also giving you warnings as to what's out of balance. So those are the main things that I wanted to talk about today. Obviously, if you join the Ladies Life Lounge, So there's lovely Jodes and lovely Rocks, who have had plenty of time to get to know over the last couple of days. Then you also get access to me in the lounge. Lots of the ladies in there ask me questions. Hi, Nisha, nice to see you on here. And I'm always happy to answer questions, and all the women learn from each other in terms of sharing what's working for them with different aspects of their hormones. A lot of the ladies in the group are, starting to struggle with the issues around perimenopause. So there's quite a lot of discussion around that. We've got some of the ladies who are still at the stage where they're wanting to have children. So we've got ladies at all different stages with all different issues going on. So it's a really great and safe space to, come in and talk about, this is what happens to me. This, is this normal for me? And, with all the other experts we've got in there, the way these subjects all interlink, everyone chimes in. So you might be saying, my mood is really low around a period. It's really affecting my relationship with my spouse. So you've got your relationship expert can help you cope with that, all of this kind of thing. So obviously you get everything I've just been discussing, but there's also a whole heap of masterclasses in there. There's already a few classes in there, or certainly one in there that I've prepared, plus some other live videos all about managing your menstrual cycle. That's in there, that's free, that's included in your membership. You've also got in there, monthly coaching calls. So you can come on and have a hot seat or listen and join in with other people being coached through a dilemma they have. So you just learn loads all the time. It's good fun. It's the most supportive community of women I have ever been in. I'm there as resident expert, but actually, I get so much out of it personally. I made some super friendships in there. And there's always support going on. If you're having a bad day, you can go on and say, look, I need some help, or I need some guidance, or, this and that's happened. What do I do with that's happened with my boss or my kid or my relationship? You've got financial advice going on. There's book club with a real huge variation of books that we get through in there, from serious to kind of really lighthearted and funny. And then there's all different discounts from all the members in there who've got little businesses and big businesses. So normally this would be £49 a month, but if you join this week, you can get it for £29 a month. That stays that way for life, which is pretty much a bargain, given you've got an exercise expert, hormone expert, finance expert, style expert, makeup, skin, fitness, and there's several more relationships. Like there's a psychologist in there, all sorts, and obviously Jodes and Rocks. And if you join through my little link today, you will get 15% off any of the upcoming courses that I'm about to launch to people. The first one I've got launching soon is all about the fundamentals of your fertility in terms of how to get pregnant and all the things you need to know around that. I've also got one on perimenopause coming up. In due course, there's going to be one on polycystic ovarian syndrome and endometriosis. So lots coming up. And other little workshops I'm doing. So you can, choose when you wish to redeem your 15% off with me. You also get 15% off any initial health coaching consults with me. So I will see if I manage to post my link in here. There we go. So if you want to join today through that link I've just posted in the comments section there, please do. If you've got any questions, do let me know. If you're watching this on catch up and have any questions and then join the lounge, you can always put them to me once you're in the lounge. If anyone who's watching now has any questions, this is your moment. If not, I shall hop off and make a lovely cup of tea. Nope. Okay, so I hope that's been really useful for you. Look forward to hopefully seeing some of you on the other side in the lounge. Do come and join us. It really is one of the best decisions you will make. It's, as Jodes and Rocks has said, you're not obliged to stay for any length of time. You can come in, try it for a month, and if it's not for you, you can leave. But hardly anyone does that because it's so cool. And I'll say goodbye. So thank you very much, and I hope you've enjoyed that. Thanks now. Bye-bye. Oh, yep, you'll be going to your doctor. I'm pleased to hear that, Nicola. Let me know if you've got any questions. I'm just going to sign off now. Okay, bye.